Hello there. This is the second part of the Pool Party 8 vlog.
First thing I worked on was finishing up the candy system. Now, unfortunately, between finishing the candy system and making this video, I broke it again, which means that pretty much nothing is going to end up working as I need it to. For instance, in the main manager, I just bought one piece of candy here. And if I go down to the candy list, they now have 2 pieces of candy, which should not have been happening, but for some reason it is. So I decided to take a walk through the woods while doing this devlog. You know, clear my mind up a little bit. I mean, the candies themselves haven't been programmed aside from triple dice and double dice, but yeah, they've all got their programs kind of in there. I just gotta finish them up, you know. Now, the next thing I wanted to work on was the DK and Bowser spaces. However, in order to do that, I had to first create a star space. And luckily, this did not get broken between the making of the thing and making of the video. And once you buy the sledgehammer, this happens. The way the letters go down is completely random and not controlled by me in any way. It just happened that way. Previously in development, the sledgehammer bait would change positions every time the scene was reloaded, simply because there was nothing telling it where to spawn each time. If I wanted the authentic Mario Party experience, I needed some way of keeping track of where the sledgehammer was. Now for this, I did a really cool thing. I created an integer array. The main manager has an integer array called important board information. Specifically during this map, when it's initialized, it randomly generates the 8 positions that this thing can go to, and then finds the position it's currently at. So since it's at the 0th position right now, space number 32, which just so happens to be this space right here, then it says it's the first one. When it's the second one, which will be element 1, this will change to 2, as evidenced by when I press the S button, which changes the position. And when it gets back to 7, it's 1 again. Previously, we would just randomly generate the star spaces as the same type of array, except to be a space array instead of an integer array. So now we're just storing their space stubs inside, and we're only doing it on the first time. Every other time, it's just going to be pulling from Rebuild Star Map, which just takes the important board information from the main manager, finds the specific spaces, and puts that back in the stars array that we used earlier to create this important board information array. We're also doing this if you're not the owner of the server, which I'll get into that later. In the original, when landing on the DK space, DK appears and throws you at the star. So in this game, Brent appears and throws you at the star. When landing on the Bowser space, Bowser appears and takes the star and just simply moves it to the next location in its rotation. So when landing on the Toxic space, then TC Nick 3 appears and steals it with a giant penguin. I know he hates the penguin joke, but you gotta admit this is cool. In the final game, I'm gonna simply take away the 3D model of the character once Nick appears.
More effort was put into the TC Nick 3 model in the King of Skill model because TC Nick 3 is more arrogant.
Originally, I got to work on a model for Brent, but I decided not to and would just do a low poly model where a gorilla suit's painted on and a PNG of his face is plastered on the front. I feel like Brent wouldn't mind this because, I mean, it's going to be a reference to that one SpongeBob episode, so he's going to be happy about that. Plus, he doesn't seem particularly angry if you put someone's face on something. Whereas Nick is very picky about the way he is portrayed in media. I mean, you know, he gets mad at Piplup jokes, but I mean, he gets mad when he's drawn the same height as Vernius, so, you know, Nick's gonna hate this game if I don't do this. I don't particularly care what Nick hates, but because he's my least favorite Crasher, but I might as well put some effort into this to make him not feel excluded from the fun. Again, I think that Brent will just be happy that he got used in a SpongeBob reference, you know? Seriously, what is making that noise? Sorry, I had to run away from some bees. Also got this slide space programmed. It jump on here, you go down the loop-de-loop, and you end up on this space, and you get a couple coins afterwards. Don't have any footage of it. It's the thing's too broken to work on right now.
Nothing really mentioned there.
Now it's time for the big meat and potatoes thing that's been messing up everything ever since I started it. The multiplayer. Followed this tutorial by Code Monkey. How it works right now is that there's simply a join scene. In this scene you can choose to either be the host or the client. I can have one be the host, the other be the client. They'll have synced up cursors, and the cursors will select the buttons themselves rather than having to pass up everything. There's a couple exceptions. For instance, if you're changing scenes, then you have to do it from passing a function from one of their things to the other thing, which then it passes it to the server, which passes it to everyone to go to the next scene. But each character can roll the dice individually, and it rolls it on everyone's screen. It's done so with the variable, and it passes in values and stuff. Sometimes, if you click too fast, it will crash the whole thing. But something that's been crashing everything is Candy. Because moving on to a candy space causes this to happen. But you can get bad desync and stuff like this will happen where one person's frozen and the other person's moved on to the next turn already. You ever have one of those moments where you're falling through a tutorial that... Again, what is that noise? You ever have one of those moments where you're... That is a beehive. I better stay away from that. You ever have one of those moments where you're following a tutorial and suddenly you get ahead of it because the tutorial's for something very general and you're doing something very specific, so you get ahead of the tutorial and then you're like, how do I do this? This is impossible. So you watch 10 more seconds of the tutorial and then suddenly you got exactly what you needed for that specific thing. That happened twice. First time this happened was when I needed inputs from each of the different clients, and I realized the best way to do that would be with variables, but I couldn't figure out how to do variables, so I watched 10 more seconds and he taught me about network variables. And then the next time was I was trying to figure out how to pass values between each thing when it needed to be everything, and it needed to, it needed to basically call a function in every single thing, but every time I tried, the variable would either not be a variable long enough for it to work, or it would be a variable too long that the thing that's supposed to turn it off never actually activates. So I watched 10 more seconds and it does server RPCs and client RPCs, both of which do exactly what I needed at the exact same time I needed it. Currently how everything's passed is that once one of these buttons is pressed, it spawns a player container. This contains the amount of players that there currently are in the game, which will be set when you open up these characters and never again. So if someone else joins, then there's 2 of them, so their player will get set to 2. Space and mouse are based on whether you're currently pressing it. Mouse hold's supposed to be whenever you're holding the mouse, but for some reason it's not working. I don't know. A, B, 1, 2, D up, D down, D left, D right, minus, plus, and home are all of the Wii Remote's thing. They'll be activated as long as the Wii Remote's being held. I had to do a lot of editing too as well to make sure that, if you're pressing PC.space rather than space. That way, not everyone's controlled by someone completely different, like player 1 won't press space and then cause player 2 to activate this stuff. Candy has to be passed whenever you get a candy space. So if the PC and the PC's owner, then it's supposed to pass into everyone else, hey, give them a candy. And then in their own thing, they're like, okay, well, I gotta figure out which candy to get, and then I'll give it to everyone else whatever they're supposed to have. But that just not end up working for some reason, and I haven't had time to fix it because it's next month and I'm working on some Mechanophobia right now.
So I think I'm really starting to get the hang of this multiplayer stuff, but the month ended so early that I don't really have a chance to